We are back for another video. Today's topic will be bodyweight movement potential, I think would be the best how I can describe it. Because we both use a lot of bodyweight stuff, not necessarily in training, but we probably started with excessively utilizing bodyweight. Maybe under forced conditions. For myself, I didn't have a gym to train at. I only thing I could do was push-ups, pull-ups, and dips. And that's what I was doing every single day. And turns out when I went to the gym, I was quite far ahead everyone else who was lifting weights all the time. So let's dig into that. What are your thoughts about why everyone should be using bodyweight exercises, or maybe they shouldn't? Maybe they should be avoiding them altogether. So what are your general thoughts on bodyweight movements, bodyweight exercises? And maybe have you noticed something that is similar to a background specific for more advanced people who are kind of frog leaping everyone else in front when it comes to their beginnings of their training?
Yeah, so as far as like, do I like body weight movements in general for everybody? And the answer is yes, I do. It gets a little bit iffy on like for everybody part, right? Like I'm not going to have everybody do handstand push-ups for their shoulders, right? But when it comes to the basic ones, like the ones that you just mentioned, and I would even go as far as just body weight squats, right? And even jumping, like hip extension type stuff. If you are good at that, you're going to have a much higher neurological innervation in all those muscles that work those movements. That is very advantageous once you start trying to make muscles grow or make them more powerful, because anytime that you can have more nervous system activation to a muscle, or in other words, the muscle is more innervated, then you have more growth potential. You literally have more electrical potential to those muscles. And then it just becomes, as an example, if you're trying to grow them, then it just becomes being able to stimulate them and then eat enough food that they grow, right? The stimulating them part, everybody thinks that has to do with the size of dumbbell that you're using or the weight on the bar. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with your ability to innervate and contract that muscle. And everybody kind of understands that. So how do we make that better? By using body weight exercises, because they have a higher neurological activation. In other words, if you get good at body weight exercises, the muscles that you use in those will be better innervated, more electrical potential, so that when you go to contract them, you're going to cause more damage, literally, even with a small 20-pound dumbbell.
So why does it happen? Why is this the case? Why can't you just do lighter weights for 3 years in a row, pulling or pushing or something? Why does it have to be body weight?
So body weight does something pretty special. Any body weight movement where your torso, the center of your body, is moving through space. This includes air squats and things like that, and jumping and stuff. Your brain has to account for it moving through space, which means that it heightens its neurological activity for more parts of your brain to be engaged in contracting and facilitating the contraction of those muscles. So you're literally raising the amount of mental or central nervous system energy that is involved in all that contraction. So you're causing a bigger stimulus, okay? Now, something that is kind of unique to kind of like what we're talking about in all our previous other episodes is, okay, that's great that it's causing higher demand of neurological drive, but there's also a thing of like, how does the nervous system actually work there? And it works with something called melanin. Melanin is integrated into your nervous system. And in fact, not a lot of people know this, but there's a part of the brain inside your brain that's actually black. So like when neurosurgeons cut it open, it's black. like real black, like my hair. That's melanin. That's melanin. That's inside. That's neurological melanin. That melanin comes from your skin and your hair and all of that, and it migrates inwards. That's why, as humans, we don't have a lot of hair. We don't, because we've taken all our hair and sucked the melanin into our nervous system. That's why we have big frontal lobes up here compared to our closest cousin, right? They don't have big frontal lobes. They don't have a lot of melanin. It's all on the outside of their body. We're the only species that sucked it into our nervous system. So going back to our previous episodes, getting outside and all this, how do you make more melanin to get sucked into your nervous system more and create bigger nervous system contractions and able to contract muscles harder and all of that? It's by getting outside and creating melanin on your surfaces. And then when you create a demand, like body weight exercises, it's very easy for it to be sucked in locally right to the muscle tissues that you're working. So that's how you create bigger neurological systems inside your muscles, by doing all the things that are daily habits that we've talked about in the past to create more melanin, so that when you have a high demand, like a body weight exercise, now you create innervation into there. Because the opposite can happen, right? Just like you mentioned, when would I not want body weight exercises? When somebody stays inside all the time and they're pale and they don't have any melanin on the outside of their body, if they create a high demand by body weight exercise, where is that demand going to come from? Or where's the melanin going to come from, is a better word to say. It's going to come from the brain. So those people will find it harder to do body weight exercises because the melanin that's up here is going to be migrated to melanin in your bicep if you're doing pull-ups. So now you're actually, the body weight exercise can be detrimental, right? If you were a gymnast, see, gymnasts kind of are a unique group because they work inside all the time and they have body weight demand all the time. But you will notice that they can't really do it to their whole body. They can, like most gymnasts, have a disproportionate amount of upper body strength to lower body strength. There's lots of reasons, like even for sport specificity, right? Body weight lower and all that type of stuff. But you'll also notice that if they try to create a higher demand for their whole body, they will suffer mentally, right? And that's not a surprise, right? Like, I think who was the famous gymnast that had to quit gymnastics because of mental issues? She was blowing everybody away. It's really because they don't have enough melanin to migrate to all of this stuff. So that's why going outside is so important, to be coupled with body weight exercises. And if you don't do those two things, then body weight exercises could not be a good fit for you. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Again, specificities that we keep repeating. You can't just take information that we are putting out here and just apply it without understanding if it's applicable for you.
Yes.
That's why the first couple of videos are so important, to understand where to actually start, to understand where you're at and where you're going. I think it's a great analogy. Like, if you go out in the street and just know where you're going is never enough. You need to know where your starting point is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you don't know that, you're just guessing. Just like if you don't know where you're going. It's the same thing.
Yeah. So when it comes to body weight stuff and whatnot, for your personal perspective, when would you start implementing it? Would it be at the beginning of a training cycle? Would it be later on when, you know, maybe someone wants to compete in some kind of powerlifting or whatever, and they need like extra kick, and maybe that gives an extra advantage of it? Or would it be something that you include every single day, or maybe something else more specific?
So if they already have a previous history of a lot of body weight movement, like you and I would have, or anybody that has a field sport background, then I would not hesitate to keep it in pretty much every session as either a warm up or as a cool down. But I would be, because they're used to it, right? I could do it that frequently, but I would then go, okay, the movement itself would be targeted to their weak point, right? So a great way to use body weight, just because of what I just stated earlier, is you have a weak muscle group or a muscle group that you aren't very good at contracting, right? You don't feel it, right? That's the word that most people are going to be familiar with. Then that's where I would try to find a body weight movement that engages that muscle predominantly. And then I would drill it very frequently so that you develop an incredible feel for that muscle, which will inevitably become better innervation to that muscle. So then we start loading it. Now you can contract it and feel and actually isolate that muscle if that's what you're looking to do. So a little bit of both there, right? Like if they have a good history with it, then I could be very frequent because they'd be used to it. And then I would just target the specificness of it to something that we're trying to bring up, or something that's very important for the competition, right? Powerlifting comes to mind, triceps, right? Triceps are very important for bench pressing. So I would do all kinds of variations of push-ups, not just regular push-ups, diamond push-ups, or only tricep type push-ups, or even pike push-ups, right? We would vary all the angles of push-ups, and I would probably be like, hey, every day I want you to do 100 of them, right? You can do them before you work out, during the workout, or after the workout. It doesn't matter. I just want you to do a lot of them, right? And you build up volume that way because it's easy to recover from if they have a previous history with it, but you can really innervate a lot of muscle tissue specifically for that muscle group. That's just one example, right? And then as far as ways that I would maybe not do it so frequently is if they don't have a history of body weight movement. Then it would be, okay, at the beginning of the training cycle, I would probably only do like 2 days of body weight only, right? Or like 3 movements of body weight only that we repeat on 2 different days so that you can recover from it, but it would be really high reps. Something like, hey, I want you to take 20 minutes. So I don't even count reps. I just want you to take 20 minutes and try to do as many of this, maybe 2 or 3 circuit of body weight stuff at the end or at the beginning of every workout, but only on 2 days. And then once you get good at that, 4 or 5 weeks later, then we spread out that volume to get a lot of frequency going.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I usually have first few weeks for anyone who is working with me to just do body weight stuff. And usually they just look at me weird. Why am I wasting my time? I'm like, you are wasting your time by not doing it. And also when you mentioned about bench pressing and whatnot, so I was doing push-ups hundreds of times every single day. So my first day in a gym, I was weighing 62 kilos and I could bench 90 kilos. So I could bench time and a half of my own body weight without ever touching bar before that. So it came around really quick. And another thing what I like to do is like strongmen and powerlifters I train is teach them to run. Like you want strong legs, you need to know how to run. Because a lot of people don't do that. And I usually do that with resistance as well. Okay, do some sled pushes, sled sprints. So really high impact and those kind of things that transfer really well afterwards into deadlift, squat, and all those kind of things. Whereas now we see majority of people in a gym coming in and doing these weird pulls, pushes, and with silly to no weight, expecting to grow big muscle because they see big guys doing that, not acknowledging that those big guys never did that to begin with. They never got there where they are by doing those movements. Now they are doing those movements just because they are so excessively strong. If they go into their compound movements, they're just going to pull something off. If your bench press is 60 kilos as PB, you're not going to pull anything off. It's highly unlikely. So you need to do some push-ups first, you know.
Yeah, you need some volume in there. You're not going to get that volume from continuing to bench press. You're only going to beat up your joints. That's another little part right here. That's another reason why I like body weight movement. It teaches you the quirks of your own body, right? Like a push-up, for example. I actually have a broken collarbone. When I do push-ups, I have to offset my hands just a little bit to make both of them even. So then I go, okay, well,
you can't do it in bench press.
Exactly. So now how am I going to bend up repetitive volume on the bench press where I'm locked in? I'm just going to cause an injury to the one side that's a little off, right? Whereas if and people would say, well, use dumbbells. I'm like, yeah, you can use dumbbells, but at the same time, they're not as easy to get a ton of volume in because the jumps are differently, the movement is different, and what I mentioned earlier, my body isn't moving through the rate through space. So the neurological activation of a dumbbell is less than a push-up, right? And most people are lacking high degrees of neurological activation, especially when it comes to just building muscle, right? Because that's what it's about. It's about activating the muscle. It's not
And I
about
think
moving.
that's the biggest takeaway from all the things you've just said, that moving your body around is what actually makes you, let's just simplify it, makes you think more. And now you're more aware about how your body moves and how you should be feeling when you're moving. You know, if you do 300-400 push-ups, you're going to feel your chest, arms, shoulders, everything. You know, and then you will try to replicate that on machine or dumbbells and whatnot. But you can bring your bench press to failure and never feel chest. You know, so
Yes, that happens. A lot of people.
you broke up a little bit. I can't hear you at the moment. Sorry.
So I do that a lot when people are saying that they can't feel a specific muscle. Like they're doing a movement and they can't feel the muscle distributor. Okay, well, if that's one that we can do with a body weight, let's really hammer it with body weight so that you can feel it. Like when you get done with 100 of whatever, you're going to feel it. You're going to be like, wow, my chest was blown up. My triceps was blown up, or my quads, right? I guarantee you, if you don't like just doing body weight squats, if you don't feel your hamstrings, your quads, and your glutes after 100 body weight squats, I don't know what to tell you, but I that's not happened yet, right? Like somebody's going to be like, well,
or everyone's hated lunges or Bulgarian split squats and stuff like that. People go, why do you program this for me? I'm like, because I don't want you to injure yourself because you're so strong. So let's annihilate you on this. I know it's going to burn, but then you're going to go onto equipment and actually know when to pull back in case you are now into zone where you're going to harm yourself.
You just start to teach more about yourself than any machine or barbell. And that's the whole point, right? Like when you're really trying to take things to the next level, everybody talks about intuitive training, just like they talk about intuitive eating, right? Intuitive training is like, I think that is a real thing. I think you can train intuitively when it comes to the weight on the machine or the bar, the amount of sets and the amount of reps. But how do you get there safely? Like, how do you get to that level? Through body weight stuff with the movements that you can do body weight, because you can take a body weight movement to absolute failure. You're not really going to hurt yourself. And when you've done that a lot of times, now when you can start loading it with machines and barbells and dumbbells, now you can really intuitively find that zone, right, of proper stimulation without injuring yourself.
This is also reminded me that I saw one very, very popular person on social media talking about you should never do pull-ups if you're over 100 and something kilos. And I'm like, I've seen KK 137 kilos doing 55 pull-ups. So you can't really tell someone like that, don't do pull-ups. And at the same time, the way I always portray why I'm incorporating so much bodyweight stuff with everyone I work with is what you just described, which I describe as joint integrity. There is highly unlikely an injury going to happen doing bodyweight stuff. But it's very likely that your joint's going to be so strong and rigid now that you move on to weightlifting that you are preventing yourself from getting injured by doing silly things. Because let's be honest, how many times we have seen someone doing some kind of shoulder press or something and their shoulder just does not hold up. Whereas if you have done hundreds and hundreds of push-ups leading up to those training sessions, let's say a couple months later down the line, you will feel if that shoulder doesn't feel right. Whereas if you jump straight into weightlifting, you will not have that mental capacity acknowledging that, hey, something doesn't feel right. And you'll just try to push through it and you're going to pull something or rip something or even worse, just packing all together. So going
Yeah,
from
yeah.
all this, have you ever acknowledged the difference between people who come to you who have had a background of, let's say, track and field, gymnastics, or everything else, in terms of how quick they can progress now that they start weightlifting compared to someone else who hasn't? So let's say somebody has been doing a lot of track and field when they were kids. They come to you, they have never done weightlifting. Is there much of a difference between someone who has never done any weightlifting before in terms of body weight stuff, track and field and whatnot, and now they want to start lifting weights? So where does the difference lie in there? Because I have my own thoughts, obviously, and my own experiences, but I want to just see if there is something similar.
It's night and day. It really is. It's night and day, because the person with a huge background previously, especially when they were young, has a huge advantage when it comes to developing, like their early cycles of training move like 1 month, right? Like 1 month of this and they're ready for the next stage. Whereas somebody who doesn't have a big background, you're literally having to set them up from the basics, and they kind of have to stay in the basics for 3 or 4 months. So it's almost a 75%, I would say it's a 75% difference as far as progression goes in the beginning stages, right? Now, how does that add up to like muscular development? I would probably have to say that significantly, but probably not as much as like a sport like weightlifting or powerlifting. Those are even more demanding on the nervous system, right? Mainly weightlifting, CrossFit, things like that, right? Because the movements are so varied and so dynamic. So if they have a history of body weight movement, they will progress those movements way faster, probably 90% faster. Something like powerlifting is probably closer to the 75%. Something like bodybuilding is probably more like 50%, right? Like even if somebody doesn't have a big background in body weight movement, they're still going to progress, because bodybuilding is just innervation, right? It's just activating the muscle. But is there a difference still? Yes.
Yeah, so I see it a lot, and the biggest difference is that first of all, they recover quicker. You know,
Yes.
for God knows what reason, I have a lot of people who come in and out of shape completely, and yeah, I've never trained, I've never done this and never done that, and then within 2 weeks they progress way quicker than someone in 3 months. And then you start interviewing them a bit deeper. Oh yeah, I played rugby between like 10 to 18, and I was doing track and field before that, and you're like, so you're really well trained, you just don't look like it.
Yeah.
And that's always the case. So like guys who have been playing rugby, they are extremely good at powerlifting and stuff, and so on and so forth. So when you come from this, is there some kind of progressions that you would be looking into incorporating into bodyweight stuff that people can kind of follow up? Or would it be like, hey, just keep up on, let's say, a couple times a week, do some push-ups, couple times a week, do some air squats. When I was doing PE lessons back home, we were doing what was called like a zaryatka, which is like, how I can describe it, the best translation would be a charge up. So there was 400-meter lap, and we would do some hops, we would do some crawls, we would do some jumps, we would do some arm swings, all kind of things. That would be done 2 or 3 times a week. So is there some kind of progression you would be looking into people and trying to improve their body weight tolerance in terms of conditioning themselves? Or would it be something that you kind of said, hey, if you can do 20 of this, 10 of this, and 10 of that, on any given day, you're great. You don't need to work any harder or try to get any progress on anything else, because there's not going to be much difference in it translating into better performance in a weightlifting area.
So so it would be more like what you stated as like an interview basis. If they already have a previous history of sport history, then it just comes down to, I just program it as a warm up or a cool down daily, right? For each of their, so literally just like what you said, a charge up, right? As far as like, there would literally be just like what you said, hey, I want you to do some lunges, do some kettlebell front squats, right? A little bit heavier than body weight, and then some push-ups in between, and maybe even add in a little air bike in there with push-ups, right? Get off the bike, do some push-ups, get back on, a warm-up of that style.
I
Right before.
like jumping around, and then people go like, "Why are your calves so big?" I'm like, "I've been doing a lot of jumping."
and that same thing, right? Like, and I would probably program it like an upper body body weight movement day for upper body day, and a lower body weight movement for lower body day. Now, if they don't have a good tolerance, is there a progression that I like? I do. And it really, like, how aggressive I am with what I'm about to say depends on their lifestyle currently. Okay. So that exact warm up that you just kind of said of like, hey, let's run around 400 meters, crawl around, that type of stuff, sled pushing, that stuff, and push-ups. If they can do it outside and they currently live an indoor life, I push that hard because I want melanin to be created and I want it moving into the nervous system. If they live inside, that's even a more of a problem, right? Like that's a deficit that they are going to have. So we want to create a surplus of that, and then they can go into the gym to do their workout. So that's how I would start, and I would start it with something that just gets their heart rate up and gets it kind of moving, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then I would slowly turn that into a grit and mentality session. And so it would probably start as a warm up at the beginning stages, a warm up outside. Hopefully they can do that or something to that effect. And then as they got better and better, it would end as a finisher outside or something of that nature, where they're literally going to develop grit, mental grit to get through. Hey, a simple finisher would be, hey, I want you to do 100 push-ups in as little sets as possible, right? Ideally 2, right? 2 sets. And then if they can start mastering that, then it's like, okay, now it's game on. They've kind of graduated, right? And so now we can dial that all back and start incorporating as daily warm-ups of like, hey, I want you to do 4 rounds of 25 push-ups with some airdyne sprints, or and then maybe some hops, like 50 meters of hops in between there, right? So 3 things, warm up every time. And by that time, that doesn't even phase them, right? It's one of those things where it's like, oh, that was easy. I'm good to go now. But you have to progress them that way, to, especially, like I said, if they live an indoor lifestyle, are clearly very pale, and they aren't developing a lot of melanin, that's a problem. And something to highlight about melanin is the reason why it gets incorporated into the nervous system is because the nervous system is highly demanding of energy, and melanin acts as a semiconductor. A semiconductor flows a lot of energy. That's why it gets incorporated. And in fact, it's such a good semiconductor that Silicon Valley is now investigating melanin as a replacement for silicon as a semiconductor, because it's that much better. See, everything in our body has already been figured out, like everything that's going on with technology, that happens in biology all the time. It got figured out by nature thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago. We're just now barely figuring this type of stuff out. And that this is one of them. Melanin as a semiconductor is a huge part of your nervous system and how energy flow works within the nervous system, because it needs to be instantaneous, right? Like when I move my hand, energy needs to be here instantaneously. And if I'm throwing a ball, for example, a baseball, not only do I need to have it instantaneous, I need to be able to put all of that energy into that movement, right? And so how does the body, within milliseconds or even microseconds, create that much energy and release that much energy through the nervous system? It can only happen with semiconductors, and melanin is the semiconductor your biology uses.
So it's not just what we do, but where we do that's going to make massive difference how we progress.
Exactly. Just listen to our previous episode. The environment makes the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how you mentioned about those 100 reps and whatnot. So my first, I would say, bodybuilding coach, the guy who introduced us to what bodybuilding is, he was always finishing his training sessions with 100 reps for the next muscle group he's going to train. So let's say he did a chest workout, and next day he's going to do back. he will do 100 reps on a back and just come back next day and do back. Then if he's gonna do legs next day, he'll finish his back workout with 100 air squats or something like that, and then come back next day and he can hammer his legs better. So he was actually doing something that was beneficial without understanding why he was doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very intuitive, and I really like that setup. And in fact, that's a setup that I kind of do. I just didn't think of it like that, right? Like it's a prep for the next
Yeah,
day.
and we talk a lot about like radio frequencies and light exposures and this and that, and how it all comes pretty much from like a Russian background. And so our influence where I was growing up was like Soviet Union upbringing and stuff. So you had people like Anisimov and Satellini and all those kind of things where everyone was pushing body weight is what you need to do to be a man, you know, and all those things come from them researching Greek methodology and all those kind of things. And they realized these guys did a lot of body weights, you know. Spartans didn't go to bloody gym. They were climbing trees and they were doing sprints and they were the best warriors out there. So we probably need to copy some of this.
The Russians also kind of kept a little bit of a secret, which and they didn't really intentionally keep it. It's just they didn't mention it. They didn't highlight it, which was most of their stuff was done outside.
Right? Yeah. Everything was done outside. Everything.
Yeah. Whether it was winter or summer, it didn't matter. You did it outside.
Even our gym was not a gym. It was a room with equipment, and you brought equipment outside, and then you lifted weights and then put it away.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, it wasn't a gym. It wasn't a gym. It was, hey, here's this warehouse, a locker, right? You have all your equipment in there, and then when you need to work out, the warm up is pulling all the equipment out into the sun or outside if it's in the winter,
or in
and
the
then
rain.
you get doing your thing. Yeah, or in the rain, right? It's outside, and again, they didn't highlight that was on purpose, but I promise you it was. I promise you it was on purpose. It was not a mistake. Because they also have, you know, like we talked about before, like the research on electromagnetic fields and things like that comes from Russia. They knew this stuff. They know this stuff. In fact, I think our government knows this stuff. They just don't highlight this stuff as being important. And going back to a point that I made in the middle of this episode just now, if you're missing sunlight, if you're missing outside exposure, body weight stuff can become detrimental for your mental health, right? So it also can be a negative, right? I'm not, again, the situation, the environment makes the difference.
So from going from all of that, I guess the summary would come along the lines that environment is always number one. No matter what you do, no matter what your goal is, you want to be bigger, healthier, leaner, smaller, faster. You need to understand where you are going to try to achieve that and how to optimize your environment before you even go into training, nutrition, supplementation, or whatever else. Basics should always be taken care of. If you don't do that, you're probably missing out on a hell of a lot of benefits that you could get without even stressing your body first. And then would probably be correct exercise or stressor application, because any kind of adaptation requires stress. So then you pick up which one do you need. Hey, I'm really bad at leg training. Let's find something that I know I'm not going to like, but body weight stuff for legs, and try to hammer that a couple times a week. Or I really like to build my back up. Let's do something that's body weight related where I can move my body through space, but that's going to involve a lot of back muscles and things. What would you say would be number three? Would now be kind of, hey, understanding how to mix and match it, or is there something else that you think it's kind of missing? Environment number one, proper stressor, finding the right stress for your result. What else you think comes into your mind that people should take in consideration when they're trying to incorporate body weight exercises in their daily routine?
Yeah, so the correct stressor is very important. And then right behind that is something that you highlighted earlier, which is where are where am I on the response to that stressor? In other words, where's my starting point, right? Because that stressor may need to be intensified if your starting point is really close to the end goal already. But if your starting point is really far away, you want to introduce that stressor differently, which is kind of what we talked about, you know, and most of this is like, how do we start somebody who's A, you know, really already got a lot of history, or B, not. That's also the other important part. I would say that that's number 3, trying to figure out or finding out, whether it's you personally or with somebody else, your starting point, so that you can give yourself the right stress amount of stress.
So I think this could probably explain more to people why we love bodyweight stuff so much. And it's easy to say when you have done it all your life. It's just kind of just, yeah, I'll do it. I can do 20 pull-ups every single day. You just, you know, but when someone has never done it, and it's hard mentally to do it, because you need to leave your ego at doors. You know, now you need to kind of go back and, hey, why should I do this when I can block out all my I can stack out lat pull down full and do a couple of reps of that and look strong and mighty. But when in reality, you're probably leaving potential to engage that back on a table, because I spent many years, nearly 15 years, without never feeling a back muscle. Yeah. Because my pull-ups are very heavy biceps focused. So my arms grow like crazy if I start training them. I never train my arms. I only train them when I diet, and that happens every 2 years or so. So, and my arms look probably better than 99% of population, but I don't train them. Yeah. Because I do body weight movements that heavily incorporate my arms.
Yeah. And that's, again, the other thing, right? If you tweak your pull-up, right, like maybe a different angle, or maybe slightly supported with your legs, could you start to target your back, right, if that was a priority for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I started to change it few years ago, and now when I do every single back exercise, I feel it completely different. What I'm saying is, I did 15 years of back training. I could pull the heaviest rowing equipment you can imagine, but I never felt my back.
Yeah.
And that could happen with majority of people who just go in a gym and then they start to do this little silly 2 kilo pulling around and whatnot, when in reality, you could have done much more efficient job by doing some inverse pull-ups, let's say.
Yeah, some inverse ring pull-ups, those are ridiculously hard, right? Like for back training and stuff like that. I completely agree with how this can lead to much bigger progress, that you have to check your ego and start with whatever you can do, right? And that will most certainly be less than you think.
And even simple things like doing some bodyweight planks and stuff, it can help you drastically.
Yes.
Yeah. No, David, as usual, really appreciate your time. It was really good to understand about not only what is done, but why it is done. And I think it's going to be very useful for many people.
Yep.
Well, thanks for your time, and I'll see you next video.